everyone, and welcome back to Sex, Love, and the Self. Today, we are talking with...
My name is Terry Irvine. I have a private practice in Rapid City, South Dakota, where I specialize in working with couples, people working on relationships, whether it's a relationship with another person or a relationship with themselves.
So fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. So for regular listeners, this is actually a dear friend of mine, in full transparency, and we are both working in a similar healing focus, let's say, from completely different angles, but so supportive of each other, which is one of the things I love about our relationship and the work like this in general, just the way that, you get the healing wherever you need to. But the thing that I want to ask about first, because it was the first point where I was like, okay, I am really out of my depth here. I need, a more expert opinion, and reached out to, was around the idea of addiction in a relationship and how a partner can maintain their autonomy and their boundaries and their independence and all of that while still supporting someone that's struggling with addict behavior. And I think I come to that question more than anything because in my observation of those relationships, I've not, in any way tried to coach or help that. That's not my area by any means. But I struggle to support the non, how do I say that? The partner that isn't going through the process, but trying to just be there for someone who is. When things like trust are so eroded, how do you rebuild that? How do you interact with someone that has those tendencies and still maintain what you need for yourself?
Okay, with that, I want to kind of narrow it down a little bit. So I think the question is, when in a relationship, how do we help each individual navigate that relationship, whether they are working through their addiction or if they're the non-addicted individual?
Right.
And I think that it's really important to understand that this answer that I have is not going to fit every single relationship, but the individual struggling with addiction is struggling with more than a substance or a behavior. What we do know is that all of us humans have a pleasure center. It makes us do something over and over and over again. When you take sex, the reason why sex in general feels good is because biologically we were created to also procreate on a species level. And so having that feel good increases the likelihood of that behavior happening. Now, not for everybody does sex feel good, and that is perhaps for a different conversation. But it's still that same pleasure center that signals the brain for us to want to do what we're doing again. And it becomes very circumstantial. So knowing that it's not just this substance that is more important, quote unquote. It's not just this behavior that's repetitive, that an individual is seemingly like they're choosing this behavior over and over again. But I don't know if it's a free will choice all the time. And to understand that is how I would support the individual working through the addiction on the surface.
Sure.
The other individual, it's also important, like everybody deserves autonomy, and sometimes setting boundaries in between other individuals to, be self-preserved is also a requirement, and it's not easy. We're talking about two individuals that love each other, one's struggling with an addiction and one's struggling trying to know how to continue to love that person. And so this just gets really complex in that sense. It's important that each individual gets their own autonomy, and to do that is a delicate dance, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So one of the things in my, and again, I've not participated this in a professional context because I don't feel like that's where my strength is as a support person. But for friends and family that I have interacted with that are in these kinds of relationships, and having been in a relationship with an addict for quite a long time myself, one of the things that I really advocated for was to almost double down on the autonomy. And that is not to say like a rejection of the partner or even of their behavior, quote unquote, or whatever you would want to say, but rather instead of looking at the partner and, why can't you change, or why isn't this working, or you had another slip, or whatever it is, and these are the reasons why I'm not okay in the relationship, extract yourself from that, in the relationship context, and focus on like, how do I give myself joy? How do I give myself trust? How do I give myself safety? How do I give myself pleasure that isn't connected to the success or failure of my partner who is struggling with his or her own thing? Because I feel like that almost, and I'm making assumptions here, but I think that can in part help the partner not feel like their decision is not only terrible, or the thing that they're failing at leaving behind or whatever, is not only terrible for them in their life, but also that now that they're under threat of their partner leaving because they haven't been able to control the the behavior or the drive. Does that
Yeah.
feel like appropriate?
So what I'm getting from you, Jackie, is trying to make sure that the individual supporting the person working through the addiction finds a way to find happiness within the relationship, but that's an autonomous happiness and not dependent on the addictive behavior,
Change.
whether it discontinues or continues, right? How does one do that? Is
Yeah.
that what you're asking in that sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it was my approach to just decide that when the addicted partner was having a good day, let's say, that was just icing on my cake, instead
Mhm.
of requiring that to be part, necessary for in my personal case.
Yeah, and I think that you know taking that lens sounds great. It sounds like it should work, um, and it works for some, right? Like you were saying, that's how you navigated that,
Yeah,
um, and I like it. As a professional, I wouldn't add or subtract much to that, other than it's important to be at least self-aware in that um, you know we got to make sure that we're not overly concerned about how someone else in the relationship is going to react to their success or failure, and we don't want to get too commingled in that. Even though we're in the same relationship, we also want to hold that sacred ground of understanding, like, it's a really different conversation when we're talking the first couple weeks versus this has been a year long thing.
yeah,
And where does the person draw their line of saying, it's been 3 years and I know this addiction has been really tough. Do I want to stick it out for another year, or do I need to cut ties, and perhaps I'm like done with being part of this person's journey for
yeah,
now?
yeah. I love that. I think that's important to have that self-awareness for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of pivot a little bit and ask about then the other side of that. Okay, so let's assume that point has arrived and that question has been asked. The person to the partner to themselves, the supportive partner, let's call them. And they say, I want to stay. My partner is struggling with this thing, but I believe in our future and the love and whatever. How does that person effectively support a partner that's going through addiction? The thing that I always found difficult was to extract the judgment. It was really difficult for me to not judge my partner when he, didn't succeed, quote unquote, or he had a bad day, let's say, or, um, Yeah, and it built resentment. And then I want to be able to just understand in more general context, like how can couples avoid that?
Hmm. I don't I I would say when we use the word avoid, we we want to avoid abuse. We
Yeah.
want to avoid neglect. We want to avoid those very harmful things. Um, w- can we avoid resentment? I don't think it's in avoiding, but it's in um, being proactive
Yeah.
and saying, okay, so I said I'm going to stay with this person as long as it takes. It's been 3 years now, and I don't have a cutoff date, and I'm going to stay with this person until they're sober.
Yeah.
There are success stories of people saying, I've been 20 years sober. There's also success stories of people saying, I was 5 years sober and now I'm a day sober.
Yes,
And
exactly.
and I think that if a person's going to make that decision to stay with somebody who is struggling with addiction, that it's very, very important for them to recognize that they are committing to a roller coaster that they are not familiar with.
Yeah.
And that even after 20 years, it's possible that they're going to get thrown some curves they were not expecting.
Yeah.
Because if a person can be honest with themselves and say, I'm in it, for the long haul, I'm never going to give up and there is no time limit. I don't think that after 10 years they would make the same decision in that sense. Um, and so how can a person avoid resentment? I don't think they can avoid it. I think they can accept that they made a decision to stay with a person, and that
Yeah.
when they're starting to feel resentment, they should probably re-ask the question, can
Yeah.
I still stay with this person?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I don't think it's fair to tell anyone what they're capable of withstanding or what they're not capable of withstanding,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know I have a couple of friends whose parents actually went through this kind of thing, and they stuck it out, and they're whatever they're celebrating 30, 40 years married, which is so beautiful. And I also know people whom for Hey, dear God, it's so annoying. I'm so sorry.
No,
Okay,
it's all right.
we're still going though. Okay, so I wanna pull back a little bit on this idea of resentment because I think you make a really good point. Avoiding it can't be really the goal in with an aim for success. You know, that's probably not realistic and it ignores the emotion altogether. So let's even talk about just in general, in romantic relationships specifically, when we start to feel those feelings of resentment, whether it's because, you know, one partner's making more money than the other, or one has more free time, or one is doing all of the house chores, or whatever it is, how do you suggest and support your clients, suggest to and support your clients in navigating that so that it doesn't become this like deep infested problem in the relationship?
Yeah, so what I'm about to say is going to sound extremely simple. And if it was as simple as it sounded, perhaps I wouldn't have a job. But the simplest thing that I can offer, and this is usually either the first or second session that I offer this, is we really need to understand what emotions, feelings, and observations are, in that we need to take all of that information and put it into just one sentence, because when we respond, we don't want to open up argument because we're already emotionally charged. And so, for example, um, let's say that my partner is making, you know, 50, $60,000 more than I am, and I'm starting to, you know, have this resentment towards them. I need to ask myself through that observation lens, what am I feeling? Perhaps I'm feeling insignificant.
Okay.
And insignificant can be really close to fear.
Yeah.
And when we start operating out of fear, our results tend to give us exactly that, what
Yeah.
we fear.
Right.
And so I feel insignificant. What I need from you as my loving partner is support or reassurance, or what is it that I need to no longer feel insignificant,
Yeah.
you know? And is it fair to ask of them, you know? So I feel insignificant. What I need is your job. Well, that's
Right.
not exactly an option. I
Right.
feel insignificant, and what I need is reassurance.
Yeah.
The last tag is really important because not everybody knows how their partner receives certain, you know, things, such as, well, how do you receive reassurance? What
Yeah.
can I do that makes you feel reassured that our two-person tribe, or if we're in a polyamorous relationship, our, you know, how many ever people tribe,
Yeah.
how do we feel that we're adding value to that tribe? You look at ancient civilizations, we're tribal, and we grow into something else. But um, the one thing that is seems to be constant is our need to be needed. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Definitely.
so, how do I add value to the tribe, and making sure that people are seeing that I have value?
Yeah.
So communication is the simple answer. Using those, I feel this way, and I need this, and this is how I'll receive it. There's sometimes it's okay to say I feel frustrated and angry, and if I'm being honest, I don't know what I need.
Yeah.
Maybe it's space. You
Yeah.
know, that's where I start with every couple that is talked about. Um, we're having X issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you really been able to like take your emotions, observe them, and explain and be vulnerable with your partner? Gosh, it sounds like it's something that should come intuitively, but oh,
Yeah.
it's almost anti-intuitively because you're vulnerable in a heightened state.
Yeah. Well, and one of the comments that I often get from people is I want them to want to do or give me these things. And
Mhm.
so I feel like that's a barrier for several of the people that I work with, and not in a professional context, friends and family, but um, they want to be clear about what they want and need and how they receive love. And they also don't want to have to say it because they want that to just be like a byproduct of the relationship. And I feel like there's maybe like an element of ego that is playing into that, and that fear of vulnerability.
Oh, yes. I think what you just touched on, Jackie, is something that so many people um, feel to their core.
Yeah.
I just want you to know how to fix what's wrong. And to that, I have an answer, and I am so ashamed that I cannot quote. These are not my words by any means, and I feel horrible. I can't remember whose words they are,
Oh, it happens to me all the time.
but it is uncommunicated expectations are
Yes.
premeditated arguments.
Yes. 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 Yes.
So coming back to that communication piece, like it's so natural to just want the person who is your person or people who are your people to just know how to make me feel better. Like,
Yes. Know how to love me.
right. And I mean, if we're not able to do that for ourselves in that moment, how
Yes.
can anyone else do it for us?
Yes. 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 That is something that that's where I specialize, obviously, is in the self-love. And that is something that I often bring up in that context, because I think that it takes a lot of pressure off of the partner. And it empowers us, I think, to be able to say, like, I am a person that needs words of affirmation, or I'm a person that needs acts of service, or I'm a person that needs, quality time, whatever. But elaborating on that a little bit, because of this idea of communication. So this is another place where I was like, yeah, no, I can't help, because I am, I'll ask my friend Terry. So, and it's come up in several, friendship relationships that I've had over years. I'm talking about just friends that I chat with idly. And so there has been this like final or immediate understanding of the expectation that they need to be able to communicate in order to get what they actually want out of their relationship. And their partner wants them to be clear about what they want and need, because their partner wants them to be happy, like that's just a truth.
Mm-hmm.
And when they get to the conversation part, the one partner says, for instance, I need gifts. That's one of my love languages. That's how I receive love, is through gifts. And the other partner says, that is not something that I do. I don't buy gifts. I'm not a giver in that way. And perhaps they're not using those words that directly, but that's the essence of the conversation. How do they navigate that when, I mean, of course, there are other ways to communicate love between them, but when it's something that's kind of cut and dried like that, where they speak entirely different love languages, who gives up, let's say, and I know that's not the response, what they need, quote unquote, and tries to accept the love in the way that it's given, and who has to just step out of their comfort zone and give it in a different way? Ideally, both, obviously, but how do they navigate that?
I'm reminded of the Gottmans. The Gottmans are renowned for their 40 plus years in relationship work. I could fill this entire hour plus talking about their research, and what it comes down to is um, when you're in a relationship with someone, it's absolutely uh, sorry, I want to get away from that language. It's very beneficial to recognize the benefits of being curious about your partner.
Yeah, I love that.
So I receive love by gifts. Okay, what kind of gifts?
Yeah.
And when you start to get curious about that, you stop saying, I don't give love that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully at some point during a relationship, an individual or both or all of them understand that we're in this relationship because, yes, technically it benefits me, but
Yeah.
also because I provide something to you or them.
Yeah.
And when we recognize that, the I don't give love that way starts to kind of seem less important.
Yeah.
And because I think what the individual is probably going to be saying is, I don't know how to give love that way.
Yes.
It's not that I won't, it's that I don't know how.
Yes, exactly. I literally don't speak that language.
Mhm. And just like communication languages, that love language that you've been talking about in different examples, it's it's just as difficult to learn another love language as it is to learn a second, third, fourth language, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
They say your second language is the most difficult language to learn because there's certain parts of the brain that have to develop. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that goes true for love languages. If
I
you
love,
only know one language, your second love language is going to be very difficult. And sometimes it hurts to not know.
yeah.
And it requires a sense of vulnerability that just doesn't naturally come.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful perspective and so true. And kind of to that point, I was going to mention that, as in my personal self-reflection in the quest to create ever healthier relationships, I've obviously then looked back over previous ones. What could I have done differently? What should I have seen or could I have seen that would have, adjusted for me? And one of them was an awareness that I had that I responded in an intensely emotional and very personal way to my partner being in a bad mood, let's say, or just having a bad attitude in some way or another. And I not only immediately assumed it was me, which is, wildly egotistical and a problem in and of itself, but also with the benefit of hindsight, I was able to see, and feedback from them later, but I was able to see that they weren't upset with me. They were actually upset with the fact that they felt like they were failing me in some way.
Mhm.
Like perhaps they weren't providing enough financially, or perhaps they weren't participating enough in quality time, or perhaps they weren't able to do the gift giving or whatever it would be. And it's so easy to say, well, if you were self-aware enough or emotionally intelligent enough or whatever, we might have survived because you could have told me that instead of me being like, you're always pissed, I'm leaving.
Yeah, yeah.
A wild mm, dumbing down of the reality of the situation, of course. But it feels like that happens a lot. There's a lot of like, and I wonder what we can do, how we can be better about embracing vulnerability. Like, how do you encourage and support your clients in opening up that way to anybody, particularly a romantic partner?
Um, it's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that I can say and someone can hear and then just get it tomorrow. It takes years of practice. Did you freeze again? I'll see if you come back.
I'm literally looking up. I posted a message in the Medellin expat group, like, what do I do about this? I cannot continue to work this way. And they're like, yeah, it's your crappy ass router. So
Yeah.
router. Anyway, okay. So how do we open people up to acknowledging their emotional awareness and being vulnerable?
Yes. So, like I said, it's not something that we can just say and do immediately. It takes a
Yeah.
lot of growth. It takes a lot of self-reflection. And sometimes it starts with just knowing where in my body am I getting a physical reaction to an emotional stimulus. For
Yeah.
example, to move away from like relationships and just in general, when I've got a lot of stress in my life, right between the shoulder blades, they
Yep.
just really tense up, right? But when I'm anxious or nervous about something, I can feel it in between either my stomach or my chest, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's a lot easier to start there in recognizing, okay, I am feeling something. And I remembered last time I reflected on these physical reactions, I noticed that there was an emotional tie to that.
Yeah.
And that's where I would start practicing being observant of how you're feeling, because um, you can be 10 minutes into an argument and then realize, oh, wow, I didn't even think I was screaming. I'm just, or, and in screaming doesn't necessarily mean argument. It could just be passion.
Yeah.
And so when you practice understanding those physical feelings outside of the event that is causing any kind of turmoil,
Yeah.
that's going to give you a better chance of like being in that moment and saying, okay, so I'm loud,
Yeah.
my shoulders are up,
Yeah.
I'm tense,
Yeah.
I'm breathing faster,
Hot.
I need a break.
Yeah.
If we don't need a break, at minimum I need a break.
Yeah.
Another thing that a lot of people do without recognizing, and it's kind of like projection, right? In the sense of like, I'll tell you that, you need to stop doing this. Well, I'm really trying to tell you what I need to be told, right?
Yeah.
That's projection. Another thing that we do that we don't recognize is, if I'm nervous about something that I have done or haven't done, am I enough? I start doing things to make my partner feel those feelings.
Oh, interesting. How do you catch yourself if that happens?
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, because I feel like that's something that you can't really be immune to or even necessarily all that aware of if it's almost a psychological, ingrained response. Fascinating.
Language is a very complex, developed thing,
Yeah.
right? And not everybody's brain is hardwired to use language in the most efficient way. I mean, for example, you take a child whose parents, at least one parent has a doctorate degree, and you take another child whose parents have high school diplomas. The research shows that by age 7, the child who has a parent with a doctorate degree knows 4 million words more than the
Wow.
other child. And that's just because that's how people talk. They talk how
Yeah.
they understand each other. And so if you're missing 4 million words to describe how you're feeling and thinking and your needs and desires,
Yeah.
you're going to be able to use how you're feeling and put it into that other person.
Yeah.
And so when we're training to be counselors, um, learning how you feel, like what's your gut saying, that is not scientific. I do not recommend it necessarily. However, if someone is making you feel really anxious and you can do a self check and you're like, there's no reason for me to be anxious, but
Yeah.
I'm anxious,
Yeah.
as a partner, that would be a really good time to say, hey, I think I need a break because I'm getting really anxious, or I think I need a break because I'm feeling something in the room and I don't know what it is. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
giving that pause and recognizing it's okay to feel feelings, and I'm getting something that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. I like that. I think that's a beautiful point. It's okay to feel feelings and not know what they are or not be able to label them exactly,
Mm-hmm.
but just acknowledge that they exist and, give attention to that. I think that's sort of branching off, but I think that that's another beautiful thing about, something that we're not taught often, or at least the way that I was raised, I was not taught to pay attention to how my body felt. It
Mm-hmm.
was so much more like, you know, well, if you fell off your bike, even for instance, like scrape the gravel out of the bloody spot in your knee and keep going. There was not really any value given to the idea of checking in with how you really feel and allowing that feeling to happen. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, we want to raise tough kids and all that. I get why my parents did what they did, and they're wonderful parents. They did a great job. I don't mean to brag, but they're wonderful people with beautiful intentions. But I do think that it contributed to a pervasive culture, at least in my circle of friends, in which we all sort of felt like if you felt something, if it was uncomfortable at all, whether it was pain or nausea or insecurity or fear or whatever, you just get out of the situation, or you pretend you're fine until it's okay to get out of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I had not long ago, I had a gentleman here that was interested in taking English classes from me. And I didn't like anything about it from the very beginning, from our very first interaction. But I kept pushing through it because I needed the money and I wanted the client, all the things. And by the end, it was just like everything, I was furious for absolutely no reason at all. The man had done nothing wrong in any real way at all. And that was one of those moments for me where I was like, okay, so this is my entire body telling me that this is not the right way forward. And I want to be able to listen to that. And I realize that that's not, my version of that response is not going to be right for everybody or even accurate for everybody. But I think just giving ourselves time to feel and acknowledge that our bodies do have wisdom and a messaging system that we need to be able to integrate with a little bit gives value to the idea of being in a conflict of any kind and being able to, hold space for that in a
Yeah,
real way.
absolutely.
So speaking of conflict then, what are your top few things that you deal with mostly or work with mostly, or the advice that you most often give to people to navigate conflict in a healthy way, regardless of, what is at the root of it, perhaps, if you can generalize that far?
Well, I think we got to start with understanding that the only relationships that are conflict free are those that are filmed in studios in Hollywood, and yep.
I love that.
There was a client who's struggling with his marriage, and when asked, what did you think marriage was going to be? And he said, well, normal. What's this normal? What was your example? Because I know you were adopted.
Ah,
Well, I watched was it Meet the Beavers, or
yeah,
you
leave
know
it to
Leave It
yes.
to Beaver. There you go. Yeah. And it's like, you mean your idea of what your marriage is going to be like is based off of a TV program? Well, yeah, isn't that normal? No. And I'm not even trying to poke fun. It's
No,
like
no,
when
yeah,
you have examples of what reality could be for somebody else.
yeah,
More normal is what we know, not what is necessarily widely accepted.
yeah,
Anyway, so that was a long way of saying, yes, conflict, it's going to happen because we're complex creatures.
yeah,
How do we navigate conflict? Again, easier said than done, but
yeah,
holding on to curiosity as much as you can in a kind-hearted nature, a benevolent way, to say, I'm not really understanding something right now. And could you tell me more about what it means for me to do the dishes,
yeah,
or what it means for you to come home and have, dinner cooked on Mondays, because that's one day you're really busy. Like, tell me more about how you grew up and how you adopted normal, and in leading with that curiosity. That, again, very extremely difficult to do, but I mean, I'd throw it back at you. Give me any kind of example of a conflict,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then I can lead with curiosity, and you'll
Address
see that conflict no longer become a conflict, but a a puzzle that two
Yeah.
people are working to solve.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and an exploration. I love that.
Mhm.
And I think too that we can, and I don't mean to, bogart your words or adopt your words here, but I think that we can apply that curiosity even to ourselves, because I love this idea of being able to say to my partner, like, why does it matter to you what time I come home? Or why does it matter to you what I make for dinner? Why does it, and not in a like, why does it matter to you, but like genuinely curious. Why is
Mhm.
that? I don't understand why that's important to you, because for me, it doesn't mean anything. And, without the need to add that second part, just the genuine, general curiosity. But I think that that could be really serving of our understanding of ourselves as well. Like, there's so many places in life where I'm looking around. One of the last podcasts I did about a woman who, she and her husband sleep in separate bedrooms. And it hadn't even occurred to me up until that point to question, like, why have I always thought that sharing a bedroom and bed meant a healthy relationship, and not sharing a bedroom and or bed meant a damaged one? And it was just like, well, because of movies, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
just hard stop. That it was a socially cultured belief system that I don't actually adhere to in any way and don't have any personal experience with. So it was just one of those moments where it was like, we carry all of this belief system around with us in so many different contexts and in the minutia of our daily lives, assuming that that's what's right or normal or the thing to be done, when in reality, we may not personally be adherent to that in any way or aligned with that particular belief system or perspective in any way.
Yeah. So what you're telling me right here is it's really like I'm getting this. Let's talk about narrative therapy real fast.
Ooh, okay.
And because I know you're an author, this should really resonate with you. Um, a lot of people have said, not everyone, but there's quite a few people that, well, I don't want to talk about my childhood. I don't want to go back there, right?
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
that's fine. We don't have to.
Yeah.
I do want to highlight the fact that as we're growing as children, someone, if not us, is writing in our book of life
Yeah.
of morals and values that sticks with us. And maybe we're holding the pen and they're writing for us, but
Yeah.
eventually they let go and we're still writing. And it's
Yeah.
muscle memory that we rewrite these stories the way they were written originally. And then we get to an age where we have some self exploration and we're catching ourselves writing these same morals and beliefs that don't make sense anymore, that,
Yes.
that are not serving for us to be a better person, and that we're really at odds with. And it doesn't mean that we can never come back to them. It means that we need to look at them and how our, for my lens at least, the mental health part, how is this impacting the mental health?
Yeah.
And so narrative therapy says when a person's ready to start writing their own story, they can go back and they can edit those
Yes.
first few chapters.
Yes.
But they've got to be ready to rewrite some stuff that was written a long time ago.
Yeah.
And no, we don't necessarily have to dive deep into it and go all the way there. But we do need to take a moment to understand what it means to rewrite our own story.
Okay. Hopefully that was the last one. We're just about wrapping up. But I want to remind you, you were saying they are having to rewrite stuff that was written a long time ago. That's where I'll have to cut it. So
Yep, and I did. I don't know if it recorded whatever I said after, but I did continue talking. I don't know.
no.
Okay,
Sorry.
so yes, we have to acknowledge that at a certain point when we're ready, we rewrite our stories, and then we continue to write our stories, and we become the sole authors of our book of life. And when we're ready to do that, we do have the power inside to do so.
Yeah.
And like I said, just that autonomy piece, the working with different morals from who you were raised to be to who you are now, and melding them. And I think it's really important. A lot of people think in a relationship between one person plus one person that the relationship is only two people.
Yeah.
Well, what we miss often is that genetically speaking, we have 4 other people
Yeah.
that come into that relationship. Now, socially speaking, we have any other siblings.
Yeah.
We have any other aunts or uncles. Not always does everybody's family look the same. And because that they don't look the same, there's a different type of person coming into each relationship, even when there's only 2 people in the relationship. Now, this is solely for, a dual relationship. Polyamory is, that many more people,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We're quick to say it takes a village to raise a child. We often forget that village is within our relationships that we create.
Yeah.
Until we rewrite everything. And sometimes we don't want to rewrite everything because we're happy with some things.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. That's so cool, Terry. What a beautiful insight. I think that also opens up space for a lot of compassion and perhaps acceptance and forgiveness for the in-laws, which can be, such a thorny spot for so many people, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I love that concept of just being aware of the fact that there are these other influences. And you didn't even elaborate on the non-biological elements that come into a relationship between 2 people, which is, of course, religion and upbringing and culture and, all the things that are informing the story that we're writing. Oh, that's so beautiful. I absolutely love it. So speaking of parents, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day about just this. It seems like such a human thing, and we even funneled it down to women, which is unfair and untrue, and we're aware of that, but just in the joking conversational context, that we just cannot help but parent each other. And she and I were talking about our relationship, like it's I so often have to like actively stop myself and bite my tongue to say to a dear friend that I think they should be doing this or that. And of course, I would never say it in such stark terms, but that's the thought that's running through my mind that I'm keeping myself from saying. And I realized so long ago in romantic relationships, like that is absolutely the worst possible approach to take. Like, I do not want to be my romantic partner's parent in any way, ever.
Yeah.
And accepting the fact that he cleans in a completely different way than I do. And the way that I clean, of course, is the right way to do it. And why would you possibly do it with other? But going further than that, even the way that we interact with other people, like I am a chatty person and I want to be out there communicating with people. I have no problem striking up conversation in the elevator, whatever. And he is absolutely the polar opposite. Like if those doors open and somebody else comes on, he turns into a statue and there's just no interaction at all. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with either side. I can give him that grace. But when my dear friend over here does it, I'm like, what's he doing? Why don't you talk to the people? They're going to want to, is that just a human thing? Is it an effective part of a relationship in any way outside of the parent-child?
I don't have research to back what I'm about to say up, but
Okay.
what I'm thinking is, friends are friends for a reason.
Yeah.
There's something about them that brings something out in ourselves. There's something that we really relate to them. Like, you have this quality and I have this quality, and that's one of the things that keeps us friends, you know?
Yeah.
And so when I'm hearing you say, you know, like, how come you're not more talkative? Like, just talk to me, you know, like, just that's you saying, I identify with so many characteristics of yours that
Yeah.
I'm wondering why you're not more like me. Talk more. That's what we do, you know. And I think it is very human, and it is very, like, to me, I would go as far as saying the individual you're talking about must be a very close friend,
Yeah, definitely.
because you have identified with so many characteristics, and it doesn't make sense why they wouldn't be more extroverted in their conversation.
Oh, Terry, I have to tell you how much I love this perspective because, first of all, it's deeply insightful. Of course it is, it's you. But secondly, it totally absolves me of the, bitch version of myself that I thought was coming out that was all high and mighty and self-righteous and like, I know what's best for everybody. And even though I know cerebrally that, of course, the diversity is the beauty in the
Mhm.
world and in life, there is still this like, why can't you just, open up, loosen up, let it go, whatever it
Yeah.
is. I love that there's just this like, why are we not more alike when we match on everything else? That's such a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why couples end up with this, the going back to the point of, I just want you to know how to fix the problem kind of mentality.
Yes.
We're partners in life, or for however long we've been partners, and you know so much about me, and we're so similar on certain things, and how come you just can't, like, know what I'm thinking, because there you get so much right, why are you getting this one thing wrong, you know? And because you got this one thing wrong, it's all I can think of. I can't even think of the last 20 things you got right, you know? um
Yes.
and
Yes.
I think that's just us getting caught up in how closely we identify with that individual, how emotions can really dictate how we respond. If you can remove all your emotions from a response, you can do a commercial for dry
Oh, that made me miss you
eye.
somehow. I love that. Yes.
Nostalgia has a powerful thing.
Yes, it really is. But
Uh,
I love that point. We don't want our emotions to be taken out of our responses. I think we want to be able to, have an understanding of what they are, where they're coming from, what they're trying to say, all of that. But I think I misunderstood for a long time that, the highest, most evolved version of myself would have no emotional response to any outside trigger. And a much more evolved version of myself realized that, of course, that's not true because I'm in a human experience here, and I was given all of these senses that are reacting this way for a very clear reason. Like,
yeah.
it's part of it. It's part of it. But there is, I know we're just about out of time here, but there is an equilibrium there that I want to elaborate or invite you to elaborate on just briefly if you're interested in controlling our emotions to the point where we don't, word vomit or explode our rage all over someone, and be able to honor the fact that those emotions exist and that they need attention for some reason, that there's something, not right or whatever about the situation. Do you have any kind of metric or advice that you give to people to be able to, let's say, moderate their emotional reactions?
um you had two thoughts come to my mind there, because sometimes, um, who we are is just inherently a person that is word vomiting in that moment, you know. And I think that, being self-aware of that part of ourselves is extremely important, um, because if we can be self-aware of it, we can start to accept it, and when we start to accept it, we can start to see the beauty in it.
Yeah.
And so that's where that was going, like learning to accept that part, you know. And if you, however your personality decides to come out in those moments, for me, um I I blame my ADHD sometimes,
Yeah.
I am not ADHD. I am a person who struggles with ADHD, which is a front part of your brain deficit where the chemicals are imbalanced. And there's a lot of things that take me extra time to do.
Yeah.
And so there's also times where I'm extremely hyperactive in my thought and in my words. And so when I'm really slowed down because
Yeah.
I'm too distracted, or if I'm super amped up and it comes out, I just tell myself, that's the human experience that I get to live, and
Yeah.
that's okay, and that I probably worry about it more than others.
Yes, definitely.
And I got there.
Yeah.
And I'm there every once in a while. And some days I'm just like, oh my gosh, I haven't stopped talking and nobody wants to hear what I have to say. And, and there's that self
Yes.
doubt.
Yes.
And that's okay too. When we linger in either one of them, we either become very self destructive or way over ego inflated.
Yeah. Yep. I
And
love
so
that.
recognizing where we're at. Now, you added on that rage part. If anger, frustration, irritability, those intense, borderline violent type of responses are coming up, that's when I suggest a break.
Okay. Like from the
But
conversation.
right, and I do that with anxiety. It would work in depression as well.
Yeah.
But the reason for it is because we are so attached, we're so holding on to this concept. In reality, what might be happening is there's another version of ourselves that maybe wasn't allowed to speak at certain points,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
they are coming out with vengeance.
Yes.
And if I take a break and I reflect and I say, hey, you know what? This is what happened. And I got really emotionally charged by that. And as my partner, I want you to know why.
Yeah.
Because not always is it easy for a partner to be curious about somebody's anger or frustration.
Yes. Yes. I was just about to say that. Sometimes you have to give them the curiosity.
Right. And that's the point of the relationship is we're here. If we're going to choose to be in a relationship, we need to understand, well, these are my words. I feel that we need to understand that we're in a relationship to help grow ourselves and help
Yeah.
the other person grow. That
Yeah.
we're not in a relationship to, you know, further the species. You know, we're so much more important than that.
Yes.
And how we do that, when it's done in a very loving, non-judgmental curiosity way, we find that in our relationship we grow, not just we as in like the two people that
Right.
are, but we as in the royal, like
Yes. Yes. Humans.
I grow, you grow,
Yes.
we grow,
Yeah.
there was a song about dipping a long time ago that kind of went along with that,
Tell me,
when I
will
when I
you?
dip, you dip, we dip,
Oh, yes, yes, yes. It's like about dipping. I only have the one, but I'm
Uh,
pretty
but
much.
yes, when we're working together in a relationship, we're there to help each other grow. And if one of us isn't growing, sometimes it's not our turn to grow. Sometimes we don't know how to grow. That's the beauty of being in a relationship is somebody else can maybe be there to say, "Hey, have you thought of this?"
Yeah, yeah. Well, or inspire. And I feel like that was another, back to that whole idea of like parenting a partner or a person or whatever. I think it's such an easy thing. And I'm assuming because, our parent relationship is the first time that most of us experience love in any way. And that's our first understanding of what, love might look like. And so it
Mhm.
does have this, sort of authoritative undertone to it, perhaps.
Yeah.
But also that, Dude, last time. Gonna have to be the last time because I gotta, yeah. But yes, keep going. Oh, I was just gonna finish off with the whole idea that in those moments where I feel like I want to interact in a way that would be sort of parenty, that would be almost instructional in some way, that I have learned to take that as a like, oh, I am realizing an opportunity to see that other people handle this thing in a different way. And there's nothing wrong with that. And what are the valid points there? And what are the advantages to the way that they're handling the situation or, approaching it or something, as an opportunity for me to grow, and taking that then as like an inspiration for, okay, what can I do? Or how can I adjust or change in a way that's useful for me as a human, given this new information that is initially so abrasive that there's the right way to do it and you're not doing it right.
Yeah, I like that you brought up that authoritative part. When I think of a relationship, I think of two people or people walking alongside each other.
Yeah.
And when I add authority into that, I don't see them walking beside each other anymore.
No, agreed. 100%.
And I'm not saying that it's horribly wrong,
Yeah.
if we're building something. I've got a very minimal carpentry background. So if we're building something, my wife, she doesn't have a carpentry background. So I'm in a sense going to be a little bit the authority on the knowledge, but I don't have to be the authoritarian.
Yes.
I can be the teacher. I can be the learner. I can watch. Like, just because I have the background doesn't mean that there's not something working inside of my wife's brain saying, well, the object is to get these two pieces to stay together longer. So I'm going to use this instead of that, And I think that's tough when we know that we've done something for a long time and it's worked.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah, it's these are those little moments that I have learned to take as beautiful parts of the uniqueness of the relationship rather than, friction points. And the example that I'm going to use is that my partner, he sweeps before he wipes counters off, and it drives me nuts.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the laws of physics say that that's not the way to. And when I say he drives me nuts, I'm being wildly exaggerated there.
Yes.
The dude sweeping the floor, I am stoked as hell. I don't give a crap how it's done or in what order or anything like that. But it was one of those moments where I noticed that, like, that belief system thing written out, that I know more about this because I have, more years of experience cleaning or whatever. And my mom taught me the right way because, of course, my mom knows the way to clean. And even though my way does make sense, the job is still getting done. Like, there might be 3 micro crumbs on the floor because he didn't clean the counter off first. Like, does it matter? Is it worth me bringing up and being like, I know how to clean the house? Absolutely. Just let this person do it the other way. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. What do you want to spend your time doing?
Yeah.
Do you want to spend your time going out and doing whatever you can because now the house is clean? Or do you want to explain to your partner how you could clean the house differently next time that they're most likely going to forget, and possibly, if they don't forget, still not want to do it because that's not what their mom told them how to do it,
Not to mention the possibility that they feel demeaned in your eyes or somehow judged for not doing it correctly. Yeah, there's just all this other shit that goes along with it, and it's not in any way important.
Right.
And I love those opportunities, that whole idea of those opportunities to grow, where, like, it's okay, this is my turn to grow. Shut your mouth, Jackie. It doesn't matter how he cleans the house. He cleans the house. That's huge. Let it be.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
We got to take turns offering.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that.
There was a time that I had been in an argument with my wife, and I can't even remember what it was about, and I don't know who could have even been right or wrong. But my wife said, I know you're hurt, and I know this is frustrating, and there's nothing we can do to change it. So we can either sit here and both be upset, or we can get up and we can go enjoy the rest of the day.
Yes, I love that.
When we're in relationships, we got to take turns being that person.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Because that's not easy to do. And in
Yeah.
that moment, I was not going to be able to do it. And I am so happy that my wife had the strength to do that, because we enjoyed the heck out of that day. We went out and we made the most of everything. And yeah, the problem was still there at the end of the day, but we didn't remember that the problem was still there. What we remembered is, like, that 5 minutes ago when that random stranger tripped on carpet, like, we got to laugh about stuff. We got to experience the experience.
Yes, 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 yes. And I think that's another thing too, that just awareness that, our partners likely want good things for us, and they want to just experience it alongside with us. And if we can jointly look at the situation that we're in, as hard as it may be, as just an experience that we get to now navigate together, we can navigate it together in support of one another, instead of, blaming one side or the other, or if you had done this differently, or now we have to do this thing that you don't want to do, or let's just navigate this experience together, and not, instruct or shame or parent or.
Yeah. One thing I would love to add real quick, because again, I know we're getting close to time, is that if an individual can notice that they've explained the same thing more than twice,
Ooh, I like where this is going.
the chances are that the person that they're explaining it to, it's not that they haven't heard them, it's that the person explaining it hasn't felt heard. And if we as an individual aren't feeling heard, recognize this is the 4th time I've told this to you, and I'm getting louder and more aggressive. If I can recognize that and stop and say, gee, the problem isn't the problem right now. I just don't feel heard.
Yes.
If you were to reiterate what I say, I might be heard.
Yes, exactly. Or at least have some feeling that you paid enough attention to be able to speak it back to me. Even if you choose to disregard it altogether, like maybe it's not useful advice for you, but at least I feel like you understood.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen people still completely disagree with it.
Yeah.
But be completely fine with the fact that they're disagreeing, solely because they know that they were heard and the other person understood their viewpoint.
Yes. Yes. Peace. It's just like, oh, Terry, I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. And I guess I just know that to be true, that's not a feeling. It's more just a truth.
Yeah.
I cannot thank you enough for participating in this with me. I feel so grateful and blessed to have had you share your insight and your wisdom and all that you've learned and extracted from the experiences of life to make you the guide that you are.
Thank you very much. I've been honored to come on here and speak my truth and what I've learned, and if I can just help one person, then it's all worth it, and it's always a blessing to talk to you. You bring joy to everyone. I feel, at least it's always great to talk to you.
Thanks, Tiffany.
And I look forward to some FaceTime when the opportunity reapproaches.
Yes. When there's sunshine and motorcycles, there will be time together again, for sure. Well, thank you again so much. Please, hug and love on your family in my stead.
Yes, will do. And likewise to the people there.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We'll speak soon.
Okay, bye-bye.